Well, as we head into the next effectively 3 weeks of this lockdown, one of the big concerns obviously has been the impact on India's economy. We've seen various projections of what India's GDP could look like in the coming financial year. We have seen projections from 0% up to 1.5% from all major world financial institutions. So just how much of a setback will this actually do to our economy that was already in some degree of distress before the pandemic broke out? And is the government actually doing enough to address this crisis? Joining us on NDTV now is India's former Finance Minister, Mr. P Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, you have actually been advocating very strongly for a strict lockdown. You were pushing for that right from the beginning. But at the same time, you believe that the government needs to do much more to help the economy. I think the question is that does the centre really have the money to announce a kind of an aid package that, say, Western governments have done, like Germany and others?
It has the money. I have written about it. We can help the government locate the money. It's there in the central government's expenditure budget for 2020-21, 30 lakh crore rupees. The total state budgets on the expenditure side is a little over 40 lakh crore rupees. Is anyone seriously suggesting that out of 70 lakh crore rupees, and we are only on the April 15th, we haven't spent a pie out of that, maybe just a few lakhs. We can't find 5 to 6 lakh crore rupees to restart and revive the economy. I can identify heads under which you can save money, you can increase the borrowing, and if you are very conservative, you can even monetize part of the fiscal deficit. There are many, many ways to raise the money. The money is there. I don't know why the government is fighting shy of releasing the money.
How concerned are you about the growth projections that are coming in from whether it is the IMF, which is talking about a 1.5% GDP growth rate for India this year, which, by the way, appears to be...
Your voice is faint.
If you can hear me,
Your
1.5...
audio has to improve.
Okay, we'll just try and fix that.
Practically, I can't hear you.
Is that any better?
Yeah, this is slightly better.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How concerned are you about the growth projections from world bodies like the IMF? Though India, by all accounts, seems to be, I mean, even in these depressing times, it might actually end up doing better than other world economies. Should we take any comfort in that?
Forget growth. First quarter will have zero growth. The second quarter, if agriculture and services pick up, you might get 1 or 1.5% growth. It's only in the third quarter that industry, especially manufacturing, will begin to yield results. Therefore, why be obsessed with growth this year? The whole world is going into a recession. We'll be lucky if we can keep our head above the water. And I think we should be happy with 2 or 3% growth for the whole year.
Happy with just 2 or 3% growth for the whole year. That's interesting. Can I ask you what you think of the government's guidelines issued today for what could open up after the 20th of April in those areas which do not have coronavirus cases or have very few of them? That includes allowing agriculture to restart, rural industry, and some other manufacturing and industrial units. Do you think that this is the right way to do it, slowly, gradually?
Yes, I welcome the guidelines. I can't second guess each guideline. This must be done by a lot of people putting their head together. But broadly, I welcome the guidelines. I welcome the restarting of agriculture. I welcome the restarting of small services. I welcome the restarting of industries in rural areas. But we'll have to really look at the map of India, exclude the coronavirus affected districts and the hotspots and the containment zones, and find out what part of India will benefit from these guidelines. In my view, even if, say, 1/2 of India, in terms of area, benefits from these guidelines, I think that's a good beginning, and I compliment the government for the guidelines.
The Prime Minister said in his address yesterday that it was he made an appeal to companies not to fire people at this difficult time. But many have lamented that was not followed up by any concrete package from the government to help particularly small and medium businesses, Mr. Chidambaram, that honestly don't have the money even to pay salaries, even for next month. Now, again, are you worried that we could see a lot of layoffs, especially in small and medium companies, even bigger companies maybe?
So the Prime Minister's intent was correct, but a mere appeal, a mere exhortation won't help. He should have backed it up with a strict warning that if he finds that there are layoffs or retrenchments, he will pass a law. Singapore has passed a law. Singapore has passed a law, an emergency law saying nobody will be fired and everybody will be kept in his job. Now, I assume that since the lockdown started on March 25, and in some states a couple of days earlier, the bulk of the March salaries would have been paid on the first week of April. I'm assuming so. Maybe I'm wrong. But April salaries are important. I think April salaries have to be paid, and the banks must be instructed to lend to industry the working capital necessary to pay the salaries for April. By that time, we'll have a clearer picture by the end of April or May 3. But if this is not backed by the threat of a law, or even a law, I'm afraid a large-scale retrenchment and layoffs will take place, and that will be a complete disaster.
But what do those companies do that don't have the money to pay salaries? I mean, if you're not being able to, say, sell your services, you're not making money, how are you going to pay money?
See, I think to assume that in the first month after the lockdown they'll run out of working capital or cash is an extreme assumption. Yes, maybe 10-20% would have run out of cash, but the others would still have cash to pay a month's salary. But as I said, banks must be clearly instructed to lend to working capital and to pay salaries for the month of March and April, and let's take a review in May.
What would you advise the government, Mr. Chidambaram, on the issue of migrant workers? From all over the country, we have voices every day, including today, of migrant workers desperate to go back home. They are, in really, really bad shape in many parts of the country. Now, I was just reading how the government of India is repatriating Pakistani nationals who've been stuck here and taking them back home. And someone rightly remarked, well, why can't we take our own people back home if we can repatriate nationals of other countries? Is there a way you think that can be done and still keep the sanctity of the lockdown?
We are talking about very different numbers. The Pakistani nationals will number a few hundred, but we are talking about migrant workers running into lakhs. I got a number like 20 lakh migrant workers were trying to move, and maybe 6 lakh migrant workers actually walked after March 26th or so. I think the way the government was unprepared to handle the migrant workers issue and the chaos and panic that set in for a few days is a blot. It will be a blot forever on the way the government handled it. What they should have done first is put money in the accounts of these workers before the lockdown, or at least on the day the Prime Minister announced the lockdown, he should have said, please stay back where you are. We're going to put money into your bank account in 2 or 3 days. Without a job, without assurance of work, and without money, how does somebody remain in the place where he is migrated to? He can't pay the rent, he can't buy food, he can't buy milk for his children. How does he stay there? Therefore, he decides to walk back to his village. That should have been anticipated, and that should have been planned for. They should have put money. Now, that is done now, you can't undo that. But I've been pleading for the last several days. Now, approach a scheduler approach. Put money in the hands of every poor family. There are 26 crore poor families in this country, Assume that 50% want some kind of help. Or say 40% want some kind of help. Even if you take the outer limit of 13 crore families, give 5,000 rupees per family, it will cost you 65,000 crore rupees. Is the expenditure secretary so helpless that he can't find 65,000 crore rupees or 40,000 crore
it's
rupees or
interesting
45,000
you
crore
say that
rupees
because
out of a budget of 30 lakh crore rupees.
So you're saying that you're not in favor of actually physically moving them back to their homes because you don't think that's practical, but putting more money in their hands. And therefore, do you find it ironic that the government is still embarking on that Parliament Vista plan that's going to cost some 20,000 something crores?
That's absurd. The only consolation is they won't be able to spend all the 20,000 crore this year. But they will still spend a few hundred crores. They should scrap it immediately. What does it matter if the Central Vista, if it has to be redeveloped at all, is redeveloped after 2 years? If the current Central Vista has survived for over 100 years, why can't it survive for another 2 years? I think these are vanity projects. I would have scrapped it. But even if the Prime Minister does not wish to scrap it, he should postpone it by at least 2 or 3 years. And every 100 crore that is saved is a help to take care of the poor. And I think the immediate thing that the government should do is put money in the hands of the poor. The lists are available with the state governments. You have the BPL list, you have the ration card list, you have the Ujjwala list, you have the Jan Arogya list, you have the Maganrega list. Put all these lists together, draw up a master list. It's all seeded with Aadhaar and put money there.
All right. Well, Mr. Chidambaram, thank you for joining us on NDTV this evening, giving us some perspective and some suggestions also to the government on what they can do. You've welcomed the steps that they've taken today with trying to slowly reopen the economy. But as you've warned, we should be prepared for some tough days ahead and be happy with even 2% growth if that is what it will be. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.